What's up, heathens? How y'all doing? I'm the Godless engineer, and I critically analyze apologist claims to give you the best arguments and information so that you could stand up and use your voice. Today, we're taking a look at a creationist video and their attempt to prove that God exists because of bees. Apparently, bees have been the key to proving that God exists this entire time. So if you want to fuck around and find out how bees prove that God exists, then please stay tuned.
We are going to prove that God exists through a bumblebee. Yes, a bumblebee. In all my years, I have never, ever heard of this. And I bet $1, let's put a dollar, that you guys have never heard of this either.
You know, I'd have to agree. I haven't heard anybody use bees specifically, so I'm not going to pay them $1, but also probably the reason why I've never heard anybody use bees specifically to prove God is because it's more than likely, like 95 to 99% likely, to be just a dumb fucking argument against evolution or something. Or maybe it's a fine-tuning argument. I'm not sure, but let's find out how bees prove God.
Did you know that roughly 8% of the flowers...
All the flowers.
Okay, so all the flowers have their pollen so tightly, I don't know how you'd say it wraps in the flower, right? Yeah. That the pollen is only released at a certain frequency, which is just amazing. Okay, so the normal honeybee cannot create this frequency of a tone. So we're talking like a C note or a G note. Create this frequency to release the pollen.
Well, just a slight correction here. It's not actually the sound that the bee makes, like when it's oscillating its wings there. It's really just the vibration in general. And what he's talking about here is true, that there are certain flowers out there who has pollen so tightly packed that the bees, like there's like 58% of the types of bees that are out there, like the different species of bees, 58% of them are actually, they actually pollinate through vibrations. What they do is, you know, because they flap their wings and everything like that so fast, they vibrate at certain frequencies, and those frequencies allow the release of these, of this pollen. Typically, these frequencies are between 200 and 400 hertz. Bumblebees had found to have an average of about 270 hertz vibration frequency. Now, if you were to translate this into like a tone, then this would be C sharp, which is just above middle C. But the important point to note here is that it's not only bumblebees that do this. 58% of species of bees out there pollinate through buzz pollination.
Only the bumblebee creates a frequency, which is what? It's
a note C.
And the note C, that when he goes into the flower and his bzzz will create, did you like my little bzzz? Will create this frequency, and the flower releases its pollen.
Oh, no. So this has a lot. There's a lot contained in what he said there, because he makes it sound like the flower is listening for this one particular note, and once the flower hears that note, it releases the pollen. That's not what happens. What happens is that the bee is buzzing or vibrating at a certain frequency, and it shakes the pollen loose, and it has to vibrate at a certain frequency in order to shake enough pollen loose. And so that's what it's doing. The way that he explained it is not how the process actually happens. Also, notice he said only bumblebees do this, and that's not true. 58% of bee species actually do this. Now, they do it to different flowers, and there are different flowers that have differently packed pollen in there. And we'll get into this here in a little bit, but there's a very specific evolutionary reason for this.
It just like flutters out. And this is really fascinating, because why wouldn't he let the flower release its pollen except only for the bumblebee?
From the bumblebee, right.
You know? He's kind of quirky that way.
He's kind of like, you know, it's like just when you, to me, it's almost like when you think you got God figured out. Or so, you know, if you're a person that doesn't believe in God, you think you got God figured out. He's not that complex. And when you hear something like this, and to me, evolution, I mean,
Yeah.
come on, let's be honest. Evolution, did it go from an A node to a B node to a C node? Then finally, through evolution, it hits the right node to release this flower.
Right.
There's two things involved. So is the bee that smart to know, okay, I got to buzz faster, or create a bigger frequency to release that? He goes up to the flower and he doesn't see that, oh, I'm not getting the pollen, so he beats faster. Come on, right?
So obviously these two do not know very much about bees or about evolution or natural selection. So for one thing, the bees wouldn't be searching for a certain note because that's not how buzz pollination works, you dipshits. Again, buzz pollination works because of the vibrations, not because of any kind of sounds that are being emitted. So the bees wouldn't be searching for a certain sound in order to release the pollen. They would just be shaking the flower until it releases pollen. By natural selection, what we find is that the bees would have tried to pollinate, several different flowers out there. And it just so happens that bumblebees, they shake at a frequency for a certain set of flowers out there. And so these flowers, these flowering plant life, when the bumblebees, shake enough, and they release that pollen, they just have to shake hard enough to do it. So like how natural selection comes in is that if you have a set of bumblebees, like a specific species of bumblebee, or what you'd have is the whatever kind of genetic traits that govern how fast they vibrate whenever they flap their wings, whatever kind of genetic traits that is, they had the specific genetic trait that allowed them to flap at a certain rate, and that certain rate allowed the release of that pollen. It was beneficial to those bees because they were able to get more pollen out than like other pollen. And this is conversely beneficial to the plants too, because that meant that the plants would have had a better chance at pollinating, other plants around them. So what you end up having is this co-adaptation or co-evolution. At no point is the C note the integral part of this, and at no point does the sound of the flapping of the wings or anything like that actually release the pollen. You would think that any body with like a fucking third grade education would understand that it's not the sound, but it's actually the vibration. If you just think about like an apple tree, if you're sitting there shaking an apple tree trying to get the apples to fall and they don't fall down, then you either shake it harder or you find another tree where the hardest that you can shake, it'll, have apples that fall down. This is not like rocket science. It doesn't take any kind of special intelligence in order for bees to try to pollinate a flower. And if they can pollinate it, they can shake that pollen out. Great. If they can't, then they move on to the next flower. So all in all, these two just simply don't understand how evolution works, how natural selection works, how any of this shit works.
A bee is a bee. It just does its job.
Right.
That's just buzzes, right? And
right.
I've seen bees, they'll go into a flower and there's nothing there. You can tell. So they just boom, 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 boom. They don't go up to the flower and think about what frequency that I need to create to release this pollen, because this just looks like one of those flowers that's a bee frequency.
This guy himself even stated like he'll see a bee go from one flower to another flower to another flower. So if you're hitting all these flowers and you're buzzing inside and you're either not getting pollen or getting a whole lot of pollen, the fact that you're getting a whole lot of pollen from some flowers means that you've just so happened to hit the right kind of flower. So it's not that the bees are like searching out any certain thing. Flowers, and plants in general, they have developed certain patterns that bees can see that direct them to like where the pollen is and everything like that. So there's also evolution happening in like the designs of flowers and everything like that. Like the colors of flowers and the designs that we can't see, but bees can see. So there is some co-evolution going on there too, but also with how the pollen's released. Because the pollen is released by vibrations, not by fucking musical notes. It's not like you could play Eminem or something and the flower's going to get scared and release all of its pollen right in front of you. Like a dusty ejaculation. Another thing to note here, though, is that bees, while they don't have the same kind of intelligence as like we do, that doesn't mean that they can't learn. bees have often shown that they can learn certain things that allow them to like retrieve more pollen. And they do this through trial and error. You know, like any other animal out there. So if a bee notices that a certain buzzing pattern will produce more pollen from the flowers that are in its immediate vicinity, then it will learn to do that buzzing pattern so that it can collect more pollen to bring back to the hive, and the hive can survive for long. If they weren't doing that, and if they weren't buzzing at the right frequencies and all that, then the hive would just die out because they couldn't collect enough pollen. And that's how it gets removed from the gene pool.
So I'm going to read to you what kind of flower this actually
is.
yeah,
let's give us some more. Let's go in depth in this.
This is a couple of
Pretty
flowers.
Fascinating. Sorry, I keep interrupting you.
Keep talking over me. I will proceed anyways. All right.
Okay, go for it.
This is a book written by 2 scientists, by the way. And they've done extensive research on this. It's really interesting.
Okay, but really, these are smart people.
Yeah.
And science. Well, I'm not saying they're smart, but scientists are usually very factual.
Right.
They're really not like, oh, this is God. Right. They take a look at something and they do the facts, and then after, if they're honest with themselves.
Right.
They present all the facts, like in Lee Strobel Case for Christ, and there's overwhelming evidence.
I'm sorry. Lee Strobel's not a fucking scientist, okay? And yes, scientists will work off of the facts, but you can't sit there and lecture us right now about bees and how they prove God and all this stuff, and then start invoking these random scientists that are saying something that I'm sure that they said, but you're going to take out of context because that's how creationists work. Scientists would lay out the facts, and then if they don't know what caused it, then they wouldn't say that they knew what caused it. But in this case, these two right here are just totally ignoring the entire field of evolutionary science. Like, in our explanations of why bees evolved the way that they did, and the evolutionary lineage of bees, and the co-evolution of bees and plants, if you're going to just ignore all of that and then just present these quote-unquote facts out of context and even incorrect in one situation, you can't sit there and be like, oh, but scientists, they're really smart and they affirm our bullshit right now, because they don't.
There has to be
Eventually
a God
you gotta pick a side.
that does this, right? I mean, It doesn't make sense that this just happens naturally.
Right. Yeah.
No. Is that you're making a logical leap to, oh, this just doesn't happen naturally. I've explained how it happens naturally. There's co-evolution going on here. Bees, they evolve and they develop different, frequencies at which they vibrate when they flap their wings. And when they go to do the pollination of the plants, because they are buzz pollinators, they buzz into it. And there are plants that have more tightly packed pollen, which promotes having good pollinators. So the plants get something out of this relationship too, this co-evolution thing. Those plants that have more densely packed and tightly packed pollen, they get these special kind of bees, these buzz pollinators that come in, they buzz, they release, they cause the release of the pollen, and that means that they're strong pollinators, and then they can carry the pollen off and pollinate other plants so that those plants can survive and thrive. And so it's this co-adaptability, this co-evolution that has happened, and we understand this. We can trace the lineage of bees back and see how they co-evolved with plants. You can't just forget all of that and proclaim that some magical wizard was needed in order to guide the plants and tell them which fucking musical note of rap god to play for the plants to get them to release their pollen.
Okay, so the Virginia Meadow Beauty is one of these flowers. It will not release its pollen unless buzzed by the bumblebee.
Buzzed.
Right, unless buzzed by the bumblebees. But it's not just the bumblebees that can do this. Maybe bumblebees are indigenous to the area that this plant is in, but this is really inconsequential to my argument, because obviously it's not only the bumblebees. 58% of all bees out there are buzz pollinators. So these other bees could conceivably also pollinate these plants. It's not so hyper specific as to what they're talking about. I will give them credit that they are right about the 8%. It's actually between 8 and 10% of all flowering vegetation on the earth that it can be but that has to be buzz pollinated.
A honeybee can crawl around the flower all day and never get any pollen.
Yes, because they're not buzz pollinated. They don't vibrate at a high enough frequency so that they can release the pollen. But again, this is a co-mutation, like between the buzz pollinators and the plants. The plants want very strong pollinators, and the best way to ensure that is by being a buzz pollinated plant.
Only the correct buzzing sound releases the pollen.
That's not true. It's not the sound, it's the vibration, like the actual vibration that the bees are vibrating at when they flap their wings. So it's not the sound that matters, it's the fucking vibration. And I feel like anybody can understand that.
That's just wild, isn't it?
I can imagine.
Yeah.
In America, bumblebees are required for proper tomato flower pollination.
Right. I mean, but again, not just bumblebees. There are a lot of different species of bees that buzz pollinate, like more than half.
Okay.
These bumblebees make a buzzing sound at exactly middle C.
I don't know about American bumblebees, but on average, bumblebees in general are at 270 hertz, which, as I said before, is a C sharp, just above middle C. So not exactly middle C, which I feel like I got to reiterate this every time. It's not the musical note that matters. It's the vibration. Good vibrations. Dun, dun, dun. Something, something vibrations.
I mean, it's just, to me,
C.
it's middle C.
Yeah.
It's not like
I'm
a
not
high
a music
C or a
person,
low
but,
C.
yeah.
I mean, neither am I, but middle C. So it's like.
No, it's C sharp. Like on average, it's C sharp. It varies between 200 and 400 hertz. So obviously the median is only going to represent like what everything kind of like factored in together kind of resolves to. So, I mean, even then you're not like it. Any one particular bee is going to vibrate between 200 and 400 hertz. And so it's not as hyper specific as these two would have you believe.
When you find with God the perfect frequency.
Oh, is that the God frequency? Middle C is the God frequency? Is it? Fucking leads.
So no other frequencies causes the pollen to be released from the tomato flower.
Well, actually, that wouldn't be true. Just because it's, again, not the sound, so it's the vibration. So literally, I would say, considering the range 200, 400 hertz, anything above a certain amount as far as buzz pollinators go would be able to release the pollen in a densely packed. So it's not that if you have a bee that's like buzzing at the 270, like we've mentioned, that anything but a 270 hertz vibration. So it's not the case that only a 270 hertz vibration releases the pollen. It would be like 270 is in the range that the pollen would release from. But the very fact that they are buzz pollinators in general means that they're going to get a little bit of pollen. But whatever is the optimal amount for them to buzz, I think that any vibration amount above that wouldn't be, destructive to the flower in general would allow them to also pollinate. So that's just simply not how the physical world operates, the way that they're taught.
Honeybees work in silence, therefore no pollen is released from them.
Well, right. Honeybees would not be able to release pollen from those flowers, but honeybees would be able to get pollen from other flowers, the other 90% of flowering vegetation that, doesn't require buzz pollinators. So, I mean, they got plenty of shit out there to pollinate.
So Dr. Sarah Smith Greenleaf demonstrated this process with a tuning fork.
Oh, that's a good idea. Right, okay.
Again, not the sound. And so it doesn't necessarily need a tuning fork, but I would say a tuning fork would probably be the best way to get the right vibrations to get it to release. So, but again, not the sound, the vibration. And I can understand if anybody in the comments right now is being like, sound is vibration. Blah. But what you need to understand is that it's not the vibrating airwaves that cause it. It's literally the whatever object, bee, tuning fork, your dick, I don't know, whatever's vibrating inside of the flower that would be causing it to release like the pollen. It's the fact that it's moving that's doing that. It's like I used before with the apple tree. Like you could yell at a fucking apple tree all you want to, like, ah, and apples aren't going to fall down. I mean, that I think that it would take a whole hell of a lot more of, air vibrations in order to get apples to fall. I think that physically shaking the tree is going to give you the best results for getting apples off, not just fucking yelling at it like you're goddamn Jesus looking at a fig.
And so when she struck a middle C and placed the tuning fork near the tomato flower, a cloud of yellow pollen appeared.
Wow.
Right. It would have to actually touch the flower in order to to buzz it. So I mean she would have to lightly touch the flower in order for it to release, obviously. But middle C, 270 is C sharp. So just below that is going to be middle C, which is in the 200 to 400 range. I would totally expect the tuning fork to be able to release the pollen because it's primed, like it would be vibrating in that range that would allow the release of pollen.
Only bumblebees buzz at the correct frequency to unlock the pollen.
Wow.
And yet again, not just bumblebees. I feel like I have to keep repeating it every time they say it wrong.
So we would like to know what you guys, we accept everybody, right? So whether you're an atheist, agnostic, you don't believe in God, we would like to know what you think about this.
I think that it's explained by evolution, and the fact that you're just totally ignoring evolution and instead going with a magical wizard shows that you have a preconceived bias. And so you're going to latch on to any particular piece of evidence that you think can prove God, and you're going to say that it does prove God without actually critically thinking about whether or not your conclusion that a magical wizard caused this to happen is substantiated by the evidence that you presented. So I think that you're hopelessly tied to your religious belief. No shade or anything necessarily, but I feel like you're missing a few steps in this critical thinking.
And yes, even you Christians, we would like to know what you think about this. Leave your comments below and let us know.
Yes, please. Everybody on my channel, leave your comments below of what you think about these two dingleberries presenting bees as evidence of God. You think they need to go back to the drawing board? Or do you think they're about to say something even dumber? Let me know.
All right.
I'm pointing to Kim because it's like, okay, that's your clue to give the final closeout.
It's kind of a fun little short video.
It is.
It's so fascinating to, we go out and we see God's creation every day.
Oh, yeah.
And we really take it for granted.
Yeah, you do.
And there's so many things like this that are under wraps that, as old as we are, we've never even heard about things like this.
Yeah.
So fascinating what God has done to say hello.
I think there's so many things that we also take for granted. If you really start researching like how the earth is placed perfectly, it's at a perfect angle, we're at the perfect oxygen level. Everything is perfect. And
well, no, it's actually not. So we are placed in a semi-elliptical orbit around the sun that puts us in the Goldilocks zone. We actually deviate in our course around the sun, but still within the Goldilocks zone. So, we're not placed anywhere. We just so happen to live on a planet that is in the Goldilocks zone. And I think that if we weren't, like if the earth wasn't in the Goldilocks zone, then obviously we wouldn't be here to discuss this. We would probably be on a different planet somewhere else in the Goldilocks zone, because the Goldilocks zone is the area around a star that would have like the right amount of energy getting to it to where life could flourish and it wouldn't burn up, and also it wouldn't freeze, or the atmosphere wouldn't get blown away or something like that. This is a very wide area around the sun, and we're in a semi-elliptical orbit. We're like on the order of like 1 million miles, I think, like closer or farther away. Maybe it's 1.5 million miles, either closer or far away at the apex of our semi-elliptical orbit. So it's not exactly perfectly in a path. We can obviously be knocked out of this path or whatnot. So it's not perfect. Then he talked about the tilt. Over the last 400,000 years or so, the tilt of the earth has actually changed. Now, as far as the tilt goes, we're currently sitting at 23.5 degrees, but it hasn't always been that. We've actually sort of wobbled on the axis for the past 41,000 years that we can tell, and we've wobbled between 22 degrees and 24.5. Now, through these changes to our axial tilt, we've remained habitable obviously. But the important point is that this tilt, while it's important to the Earth being able to have seasons, that the seasons itself is not exactly needed for life. You could have no tilt and have no seasons, and you could still have life on a planet. Or you could have an extreme amount of tilt and you would just have extreme seasons. Life could still exist on a planet in those two situations. Life has been shown to be remarkably adaptable to different kinds of climate. So basically what I'm saying is that there's nothing that says that 23.5 degrees is uniquely suited for life. Now, he mentioned like the perfect oxygen level, and it's important to note that we actually have archaeological evidence that actually points to the varying levels of oxygen that our planet has been through. Like at one point there was a very high oxygen, like 30 to 35% oxygen. And this allowed insects to grow to humongous proportions. Of course, the Earth, as we know through, archaeology and geology and all this other stuff, oxygen originally wasn't here on the Earth. That was actually produced by life. It was produced by cyanobacteria going through photosynthesis during the Great Oxidation Event 2.4 billion years ago. There have even been some periods in Earth's history where the oxygen level has dipped to 15%. Now, the current oxidation level of 21% is suitable for large animals and also helps to control wildfires as well as respiration. But by no means is it some kind of eternal constant or divine number for oxygen level. Essentially, life on Earth has adapted to the amount of oxygen that has been available. Between the lows of 15% to the highs of 30 to 35, where insects were just gigantic, and coming to now with 21% in our current state.
And if we move closer or farther away from the sun, we either burn up or we freeze to death.
Well, now, so this would be true, but only in extreme instances. Like you would have to move us really far out. Like I really don't think most creationists out there consider like how big the Goldilocks zone is and how much deviation is already in our orbit around the sun. So like when they say just a little bit, what we're talking about is a magnitude of like 2 astronomical units or something like that, which is, if you don't know, 1 astronomical unit is the distance between the Earth and the sun. So you're talking about a huge change in our elliptical orbit around the sun.
And I think there's so many things you look out there and you say, it's really beautiful, but
what are you missing?
Well, yeah, that beauty is perfect.
Yeah.
No, that's a subjective determination. I think certain things are beautiful and perfect. I think my wife is beautiful and perfect. Now, does that mean that my wife is absolutely perfect, like transcendentally perfect? No, that's not what I'm saying, but she is perfect for me. And I view her as perfect. So like, it's like perfection is in the eye of the beholder. Kind of situation. He's making these subjective determinations and trying to place that upon God to make it some kind of transcendental objective fact that these things are beautiful. But the point is that this beauty that he experiences is just chemical reactions that are going on in his head, and it's making him feel that way, and that's perfectly fine. I'm not here to shit on what he thinks is beautiful, but for him to be like, oh, this is like absolutely beautiful or objectively beautiful. I know that he didn't say those words specifically, but he definitely is implying these things.
And God made it perfect.
Perfect. Yeah.
Sorry to interrupt.
So we're gonna start digging up some of those fun little facts.
We have a lot.
Facts. There's a lot of them.
We have a lot of really cool
that really point to God.
I keep interrupting her.
I know. I just keep talking because
Sorry,
shut up at some point.
Yeah, gosh. Okay.
Anyways, we hope you guys have fun, and we will see you in the next one. Bye.
Bye.
Okay, well, that's going to be it. That's how bees apparently prove that God exists and that God is somehow the creator of the universe, the creator of the earth. This apparently just goes right in with the fine tuning of everything, specifically the earth. So, yeah, I don't see their point. I don't understand why they think the way that they do, because it just seems like they're ignoring scientific evidence in order to use scientific evidence in order to push their creationist ideology. I feel like you're not doing yourself any favors if you're going to use scientific facts but ignore the facts that contradict your conclusion. That shows that you have a bias, that you're going to just only represent the facts that you want to acknowledge and leave everybody in the dark about the facts that prove you wrong. And you don't need to do that. That's not the way to convince somebody, because it's slimy, it's disgusting, and you should definitely present all of the facts. And if you don't understand the facts, then either read up on it or just don't fucking talk about it in a YouTube video like you know what you're fucking talking about. Anyways, that's going to be it for my video today. If you will, please go down below and let me know what you thought about them and their argument for God. Do you think that bees can prove that God exists? Do you think that it's kind of slimy, smarmy, whatever, really dubious that they just leave out scientific information that disagrees with them? Let me know down below in the comments. And while you're down there, why don't you smash that like button and subscribe if you like this kind of content. Don't forget to stand up and use your voice. Bye, heathens.